Hello, Mr. Brecque, and welcome to Computer Science Chats. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Victor. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much for being willing to do the interview. So I have several questions to ask you. First, could you please introduce yourself and your educational and career background?
I'm Charles. I'm the founder of a company called Legislate. What we do is we allow businesses to extract data from their contracts on the post-signature side, and then we also allow them to create contracts and manage their templates. In terms of my background, I studied engineering in France and moved to Oxford to work at a machine learning spin out called Mind Foundry. And then after 3 years at Mind Foundry, I sort of came up with the idea of Legislate and started Legislate.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much. Could you describe some of the activities that you do or did through your work?
You mean work activities or extracurricular?
Either works.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of and is this at Mind Foundry at Legislate or during my studies?
It's up to you. If you want to start, we can. If you want to start with legislate, we can go with that.
Sure. So I guess in terms of work, I'm a CEO, so and also as the founder, it sort of means that you wear many hats. So right now, today, I'm in Spain with our software team. So I'm providing product input, direction, and support. But when I'm in London with the commercial team, it's more about speaking with clients, speaking with investors, and both current and prospective. And so it's about making sure that the company is heading in the right direction, that we have the right vision, and that this direction and vision is sort of resonating with our customers and growth. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's on the work front. Yeah, I'll stop there.
So you mentioned like extracurriculars, like what are some of those?
I think as a workaholic, I've not been good at having many extracurricular activities, and this is consistent throughout education and work. But I guess more recently, I have tried to find time or make time for sport, and because I do feel like it sort of I was slipping into unhealthy habits, and that would impact my work performance. So what I've been doing since September last year is high intensity workouts, and I'm definitely not a pro, but it's sort of I am course correcting and heading in the right direction, hopefully.
That's very interesting. So what is it that you like most, and what do you find most challenging about being a CEO and a founder?
What is interesting is that every day is different, and you learn or you have to learn very quickly, and therefore as an individual, you feel like I'm growing every day. But obviously, the challenges is that you're at the top and you don't necessarily have anyone leading you, so you sort of need to lead yourself. And obviously, I'm surrounded by mentors and great leadership to sort of help with those decisions. But at the end of the day, I'm accountable for those decisions, and it can be quite lonely to make those decisions. And sometimes those decisions can impact. It might be changing the color of the product, which is the impact is quite minimal, or maybe it's a big impact, but it's not necessarily going to impact people's lives. Whereas when you have to make other decisions around hiring or firing, there are deeper implications, and so there's a lot of responsibility, and that's with this power you need to sort of be responsible.
Thank you. Before your work at Legislate, you worked at Mind Foundry, which for our viewers is a company started at Oxford University and focuses on the use of AI to solve problems. How did that experience contribute to your decision to start a new company?
Yeah, so at Mind Foundry, I was one of the early employees, and really got to see what it's like to be at a fast growing startup in the AI space, and so I learned a lot about machine learning and AI from the founding professors, Steve Roberts and Michael Osborne, and not just at a high level, but also how to actually implement. So I definitely feel like my AI foundations were sort of built at Mind Foundry and influenced how I view AI and how to use AI, and therefore how Legislate uses AI. But I think on the practical front at Mind Foundry, I was in more of a commercial role, so I had to sort of learn how to sell Mind Foundry's products and how to sort of get customers, and that's a skill which I then sort of had to bring to Legislate. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't be where I am without that experience at Mind Foundry.
Yeah, thank you. So I know that your company works with like sometimes like what could be considered sensitive legal documents at times. What are some of the like challenges with dealing with these, especially as a startup using a lot of machine learning technology?
Yeah, I think there are valid concerns around data security, but at least with modern software, you can implement best practices very easily, whether it's using third-party software on the authentication front, for example, and even just by hosting your software with AWS or Google Cloud, you are benefiting from all their security. So I think the security or the protection of the data is something which um, is what we do, obviously, but not really too much a concern for our clients. I think on the AI front, where we've had some questions, has been more around, are we using third-party services like OpenAI? Because if we are, then it means that we're sending client data outside of um, our servers. And obviously our clients are happy to put their data in our servers. But if we're using OpenAI, then it means that we're sort of sending their data to a third party. And we don't know how OpenAI treats data and what they do with it. So that's why we don't use OpenAI in our model or in our production environment. And that's why ultimately we sort of, that's how we address those concerns, by having everything in-house and implementing best practices.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and that's definitely really important when considering that. So, focusing on your entrepreneurship, it was really interesting reading your blog entries, and you discuss various topics like starting a company, salary decisions, and like things about overall employee satisfaction. So, what is it that like motivated you to start a blog like this and begin these discussions?
Yeah, I think a blog is a great way to share your personality. People buy from people, people work with people, which means that if you're a new software company, um, even if you have an amazing solution, clients will only engage with you if they like you, or they like your personality, or they can relate, or they can um, connect. And there are different ways of connecting. Obviously, you can connect in person. You can connect via your network, or you're already connected via your network, or you can, connect with words with a blog. And so very early on, we sort of had a blog whilst we were building the software to sort of build an online presence and credibility by sort of talking about topics which were relevant to our target audience. And then it just led to a lot of traffic. So we then sort of doubled down into how do we sort of get more content which resonates with our target audience, even if it's not necessarily content which is directly related to what we do, at least it will attract our target audience. So that's sort of where the blog came from. And we've even expanded beyond the blog. We also have a podcast. And that's been another way of sort of conveying personality and who we are and credibility.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, for some of our viewers that don't necessarily know how startups work, what are some of the early steps needed in developing a startup like Legislate?
I think there are many steps, and there's no single source of truth or single way of doing things. If you're lucky and you're technical, you can sort of and you can code or you can sort of craft the solution, the first version of the product, then really nothing's really stopping you. You need to build something, and then get your first users, get your first customers. And if that sort of works, then you can either choose to generate some revenue and reinvest the revenue into the product, and that could be, for example, to cover hosting costs, or maybe you're just one developer and you want to hire a second developer. So in the ideal scenario, from your first version of the product, you can generate enough revenue to then sort of reinvest that back into your growth. But if, for example, the development of what you're building is going to take a long time, or will require lots of resources, for example, OpenAI, they raised, I think, over $11 billion to build what they have today. And so I think, another route, if it is that what you're building is going to take a lot of resources, then you can, find some investors who believe in your vision, believe in the opportunity, and will sort of invest in your business. And with that capital, you can then invest it in building your team, building your product, and scaling. So those are sort of the two paths. You can generate revenue and be profitable and be bootstrapped. That doesn't work all the time, or at least it tends to work for the less complicated solutions. But if you have a complicated solution that has a big potential, then you can sort of raise some funding, and then afterwards it's just going through the different steps. So hiring, building, selling. And but the reality is there's 3 steps. You'll end up going back and forth between them, because what you maybe built the first time isn't actually what sells, or maybe what ends up selling is something that you could only work out if you had those first users. Because lots of startups, they pivot, and it's not that they're sort of going backwards, it's that they're actually learning that their initial assumption about the problem or the solution was maybe wrong, or they misinterpreted it, and so you need to constantly iterate. And obviously you need to have investors who are willing to support you through that journey. But as long as you have a sort of clear vision and clear direction, it doesn't really matter how you pivot, as long as you're sort of heading into that direction. So yeah, I think, yeah, I'm just rambling now.
Oh, that's great. So do you have any advice for getting those initial early like users and investors?
I think on the user front, you need to sort of understand where they hang out, or where they make decisions, or how they make decisions. For example, if you're building a tool for developers, well, it's where do developers hang out? Stack Overflow, GitHub, Hacker News, they're all sort of valid areas. Reddit communities, they're all sort of valid areas where you might be able to find some of those initial users. If you're selling to business users that work in big companies, then LinkedIn is a great place to sort of start. And then it's a question of, well, how can you connect with those people? It might be that you have some mutual connections that can make introductions, or you just need to reach out to them cold. And chances are, if you're solving a real problem for them, then they'll sort of want to engage. And I think a podcast is a great way to engage with early adopters if you're not that certain about the problem or the solution. And the best way is to sort of speak to your ideal customer profile, ask the questions that you'd want to ask. You're giving them also a platform to talk about their brand and reach more people. So they probably are likely to engage. And then that's how you sort of can also, in a way, build a following of early adopters, and also understand what their problems are and how you might be able to solve it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Could you talk a bit more about the role of software developers within Legislate? So I like differences between like working at a startup and like, for example, some big company.
Yeah, I think a lot of our team have only worked in startups. We do have some who have come from bigger companies, and I think in bigger companies where their solutions are more established, there are relatively limited changes that you can make to the software, um, and the metrics or the goals are a bit different. So, for example, if you're a software in a big company, maybe your goal will be to increase user activation on the sign up page. So you will only work on the sign up page, and and you'll spend 6 months trying to improve the number of users that sign up. And it might be okay. Let's put the button on the left for 50% of our users, and then button on the right for the other 50%. And then the types of problems will also be different. It'll be, well, actually, we're getting the reason why our activation isn't great because the platform crashes when we've got thousands of people on the login page at the same time, or the sign up page. So the problems are limited in scope but deeper. Whereas when you're in a startup, you don't have necessarily that many users or customers. And it's more around, well, how do we sort of build a complete product that actually solves a problem? So you generally have to sort of work on more aspects of the product. You're spending less time maintaining, you're spending more time building, and I think generally you also need to you don't have the luck of having a big quality testing team to sort of make sure that there are no bugs. So you might have to do the testing yourself, or you might have to fix bugs very quickly if clients find them.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, what advice would you have for high school students who'd like to pursue computer science or even computing in general?
I think knowing how to code is really important. And I think whilst there are certain people who think that we won't need developers because of AI. I think the reality is that if you're a developer who uses AI, then you'll be a lot better than someone who only uses AI, or someone who doesn't use a developer who doesn't use AI. Because ultimately you need to understand how things work um, to be a good developer, and the best way is to know how to code. I think the other thing about coding is there are lots of resources out there in terms of learning how to code, and obviously, schools and universities are more focused on teaching people how to code. But I think I learned how to code in my early 20s, and I wish that I had actually learned a lot earlier, because then I'd be able to maybe have coded the first version of Legislate entirely by myself without any external support. And I think that would have maybe helped Legislate a lot. So I think yeah, learn how to code properly, well, and you'll be in a good position.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, as a final question, where do you think that AI or machine learning is going to go in the future?
I think it's definitely um, accelerating. But the challenge with machine learning and AI has never been around the improvements or the acceleration of improvements. It's always been about the adoption and the application to real problems. And I think one of the great things that OpenAI have done is they've created an awful lot of awareness of AI. And it means that when you're speaking to prospective clients or users, you don't need to spend 50% of your time explaining to them what it is. They already understand, and they can sort of start to think about their problems and how they might be able to apply them. So I think a lot of, over the next couple of months, I still think now the market understands what AI is, but they're still trying to figure out how to apply it. And I think because more time is actually spent now on applying it to problems or identifying problems which are suitable for AI, we'll see a lot more applied AI being implemented in businesses.
Yeah, thank you very much for being willing to do this interview and for meeting with me.
Thank you for having me.